I'd like to preface this presentation with an acknowledgement of the seriousness of the issues that I'm taking up. I understand from a personal perspective the seriousness of sexual violence and crimes in the family. I have an enormous amount of sympathy for the victims. I hope that they receive justice from society. I hope that perpetrators everywhere are brought to justice. But I also think that it's important to think clearly about these issues, to direct our energies efficiently so people can be brought to justice. And I don't think that we can afford to misdirect our attention and to use groups as scapegoats, especially if that means that people who are committing crimes amid us are allowed to go unpunished. So that is my take on this. I understand that my comments will probably be perceived as insensitive or as triggering for some of the people who view this presentation. I apologize. I really do feel for you in your experience, and I really do wish you well.
Welcome to my channel. My name is Daryl Weinberg, and I am a practicing Jehovah's Witness in good standing. This video, though, is not produced by the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society of Pennsylvania, the legal entity that takes care of the business side of the Jehovah's Witness organization. And it's not approved or produced by the 8 faithful members of that governing body located there in Warwick, New York. And it's not approved by any local body of elders. Please read Matthew 23:10. Don't call any man on the earth your leader. My leader is Jesus Christ. He's my king. And his leader is Jehovah God. And that's the only one he answers to, but we answer to Jesus Christ, who answers to Jehovah God, so therefore we answer to Jehovah God also. Now, many of the apostates here want to attack my person. They attack my suits I wear. They attack my bald head or my appearance. I'm a little overweight. Yeah, a lot of overweight. But they can't attack my message. Not a single one of them. Not successfully. They'll find fault with my videos. For instance, here a while back, I claimed that the Jehovah's Witnesses, when they were called the International Bible Students Association, mentioned, undoubtedly persuaded by Holy Spirit, that the Jehovah's Witnesses would one day carry handheld wireless telephones to the door. And I got this big uproar from Skim and Schmicky, a couple of scare pair there, ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, apostates, full-blown, and this Smurf idiot, who I proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that she's a big fat liar with the fraud that she perpetrated on her crowd that follows her, and her claiming that she's one of the anointed, and or was one of the anointed. I don't know if she is or was or whatever, and that she was a Freemason. And of course she's a big fat liar. And remember that letter that I proved that she was frauding people over. But these people attack me personally. They can't attack the message, and I don't care, because they attacked Jesus personally. They attacked all the prophets in the Bible were attacked personally, not their messages. I'm only messaging from Jehovah God. You can't attack Jehovah God. And all the ex-apostates, or the ex-Jehovah's Witnesses rather, the current apostates, ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, are liars, and I can prove that, and I have proven it. They made 2 vows before Jehovah and perhaps thousands of witnesses. First of all, that they were going to serve Jehovah for life, and second of all, they were going to serve his earthly organization. Now, some of them will claim they didn't make that vow. They're liars. You can look them up. You can research them. In fact, I think I have a video with them. But anyways, today we're going to discuss this false rumor that the apostates are proclaiming that the Jehovah's Witnesses have a secret database that protects pedophiles. And that's a blatant lie. It's just a barefaced lie. It's propaganda. There's no substance to it. And not one of them can prove it. One of them swears to it, and the others lie about it. Or one of them lies about it, and the others swear to it. And that's about the basis of it. There's no proof to any database. In fact, today we're going to hear from Professor Holly Folk, who's at the Western University of Washington, and she's going to produce, I'm going to excerpt some of her video. Her video's down below, and you can watch it in its entirety, and I advise you to do so, because Dr. Folk doesn't have a horse in this race. She has no hidden agendas. She has no axes to grind. She's impartial. She's balanced. Now, she has toned down her rhetoric. I do not. So, without further ado, let's find out what Professor Folk found out.
Let me go back and point out a prominent article that came out a couple of years ago. I think this was actually last year, from the Atlantic Monthly, reporting on what they call the secret database of child abuse. This is an article that came out in a prestigious publication, but in the past few years, there have been many, many reports that have come out that have said something similar, very often in tabloid publications, a secret database about child molestation. Back a couple of years ago as well, the BBC and other major news outlets took up this story. And so there's been a meme that's circulated in the media for a number of years now that the Jehovah's Witness organization is maintaining a secret database that protects pedophiles. I feel this is very unfortunate. I feel that there's an awful lot that is very deliberately misleading.
Well, there you have it. There, if you want to know where this secret database rumor, and that's all it is a rumor. It's misleading, as Professor Folk brought out, Dr. Folk. It's unfortunate because it's a lie. There is no database. Nobody's ever found one, especially the apostates who claim there's one. And where they got it from the tabloids, according to Dr. Folk. And we all know that the media can be fake news. And it's been brought out many times that the media can be fake news, like the BBC. They'll see something and it'll strike an idea with them and they'll post it without researching it. And they've done that. And that's kind of where this all originated, was for out of the tabloids. So that's basically what it is. It's a tabloid rumor.
The Royal Commission, as I said, looked at many secular institutions, not just the JWs, but in terms of looking at complainants from the Jehovah's Witnesses, they only interviewed 2 people from cases from 1989 and 1992, respectively. And there was an issue that happened in the study done by the Royal Commission that is highly problematic, and was carried over into the studies done in Europe as well. And that is that the Commission elected to conflate family-child sexual abuse with institutional abuse. And that is how they arrived at this number. So let's talk about the issue first about family-child sexual abuse versus institutional abuse and consider what's at stake. Something that we know, unfortunately, from a number of sociological studies is the rate of sexual abuse of children is very high. Large numbers of children in societies around the world report having been sexually abused. And we don't know quite so much about the rates of perpetrators, but the studies I've looked at all seem to sort of arrive at the idea that somewhere between 2 or 3% of men do victimize children in multiple countries. This is something that was found, among other places, in a study done in Australia. And so unfortunately, we need to anticipate that in any large human population right now, we are going to see sexual abuse of children, and that may happen, unfortunately, quite separately from how any individual religion or other social institution is operating. That is to say, it's not the beliefs of the organization that are actually driving the behavior. There's actually very little evidence that the Jehovah's Witnesses are guilty of what is typically considered institutional abuse.
Wow. Interesting. Anyways, you'll notice there by Professor Folk's research that they only interviewed 2 people. This farce of a commission called the Australian Royal Commission. What a joke it was, by the way. It's problematic, and the issue being that the commission conflated, in other words, they added institutional or family sexual abuses with institutional sexual abuses. And that's most unfortunate, and it is misleading. Another thing is child sexual abuse is very high in the world. And through Dr. Folk's research there, we can see that it's probably around 2 or 3% of men, not even mentioning how many women, in the world that abuse children. Dr. Folk concludes it is not a result of the beliefs of the institution. So generally, it's just a norm that between pedophiles that they're going to 2 to 3% of men are going to abuse children through pedophilia. Now, there is very little evidence. Again, I'm repeating what she says here. Now, there is very little evidence that the Jehovah's Witnesses are guilty of institutional abuse. Very little evidence. There's no evidence. Come on, Dr. Folk. There's no evidence that the Jehovah's Witnesses are guilty of institutional abuse. So, without further delay, let's see what else Dr. Folk concluded. Now, again, before I go there, I'm not going to tone down my words. Again, Dr. Folk is toning down her words because she must not take a position. She has to report fair and balanced. But I'm not going to hold back the guns. Dr. Folk, please.
And so unfortunately, we need to anticipate that in any large human population right now, we are going to see sexual abuse of children, and that may happen, unfortunately, quite separately from how any individual religion or other social institution is operating. That is to say, it's not the beliefs of the organization that are actually driving the behavior. There's actually very little evidence that the Jehovah's Witnesses are guilty of what is typically considered institutional abuse, which we see in many other religious organizations. For one thing, the Jehovah's Witnesses do not have a set clergy in the same way that the Catholic Church has a bureaucracy of lifelong people whose entire vocation is religious work. They do not have children's programming. They basically operate as a lay organization, and as such, you do not see the same type of instances of children who are participating in Sunday school being abused by Sunday school teachers, or pastors victimizing, adolescents or something like that, because the social organization of the JWs doesn't foster that. But when the Royal Commission were reviewing the files and the information from the Jehovah's Witnesses, they elected to convert over to institutional abuse any cases of sexual abuse that had happened within the family that were reported to Jehovah's Witnesses, especially in terms of how discipline of members of the organization was being conducted. And so the rationale from the Royal Commission was that in the reporting and the discipline, and then quite honestly, another way to look at this is in terms of the pastoral counseling and the pastoral care, the disclosure of information immediately made the religious organization liable. Now, in the present day, when there is mandatory reporting, there is liability. But in the cases that are coming forward around the world right now, you're talking about situations where mandatory reporting laws were not in place. And so we have to think, I think, very clearly about the rapidity with which standards have evolved. I think that that's a very, very good thing. But we also actually have to sort of take into context, when things happened and the standards of the time when they did. So moving forward and returning to the questions of the findings in the Australian study, the assertion in the media was that the Royal Commission found 1,000 or more perpetrators of sexual abuse in the Jehovah's Witness organization. And let's clarify the 1,006 statistic. It reflects the sum of all disciplinary reports and referrals, proven and unproven, that had been submitted to the Jehovah's Witness organization in Australia over a 65-year period.
Very interesting, isn't it, folks? The thing of it is that when you look at this, you can tell that this commission was out of whack. I mean, it's obviously. I got little sticky paper notes here. Oops, I hit that, didn't I? The reason we do not see, and this is according to Dr. Folk, the reason we do not see institutional abuse of children when the JWs is they do not have a set clergy. We're basically a lay organization, like the Catholics and others, like lifelong priests and stuff like that. We do not have children programming like Sunday schools. Now, the social organization does not foster the schools and the children being programmed separately from adults. So there's no pastoral contact in groups with an elder, a ministerial servant, and small groups of children. Now the ARC, the Australian Royal Commission, elected to combine family sexual cases with institutional cases. There are two different fields there. By doing that, the ARC disclosing of the information actually made the Jehovah's Witness organization liable, or they tried to. Of course, it's not going to work. If there is mandatory reporting, then yes, there would be liability. I think there's a case now pending where one of the elders was supposed to and didn't report something in the family. In the past, though, there were no or none or few places with mandatory reporting in the world. So we need to take into consideration that it was not always mandatory to report. Yet, in many cases, over the last 65 years, these 1,006 cases, the Jehovah's Witnesses did report the cases to the authorities. There goes your apostate meme that there's a secret database. If there was a secret database, why would the JWs pass on charges to the authorities, pass on the cases to the authorities? But there were cases that were not reported in the world because it wasn't mandatory to do so. So you can't hold that against the Jehovah's Witnesses. Now, out of 1,006 cases that were turned over to the authorities, the ARC, or the Australian Royal Commission, by the Jehovah's Witnesses, 383 of those were also turned over to the police when they happened. Now, that was over a 65-year span. And 383 of those cases were reported to the police. And out of those 383 cases, only 161 were prosecuted, convicted. Well, I guess we put the kibosh on that rumor that there's a secret database. If there's a secret database, why did the Jehovah's Witnesses in Australia turn over all those names to the authorities? Stay tuned for part 2 because it's already done. Because in this case I did part 1 and then part 2 and then I had to go back and redo part 1. Thanks for watching the video.